While the Nigerian economy has been able to survive the COVID-19 induced recession, the country's economic output is expected to stabilize around 3.4% in 2022, reflecting improvements across telecoms, trade, manufacturing, and oil and gas sector, going by the rise in crude oil price. Going by the impressive 3.4% growth recorded in gross domestic product in the fourth quarter, Q4 of 2021, surpassing the projections by the World Bank and International Monetary Fund of 2.5% and 2.7%, respectively. Economic analysts have emphasized the need for major reforms in fiscal, exchange rate, trade, and governance areas to support long-term inclusive growth and sustained macroeconomic stability in the year 2022. However, a clear exchange rate policy that would attract larger capital inflows, including foreign direct investments, which has significantly dropped in the years. Well, Dr. Andrew Nevin is a partner and chief economist at PricewaterhouseCoopers, the PwC Nigeria. He joins me now via Zoom to analyze what kind of economic policy mix we might need to spur growth in Nigeria's economy. Good afternoon, Mr. Dr. Nevin. It's good to see you.
Tolo, it's great to see you. Of course, now I don't come to the studio in Lagos anymore because I live in Abuja, but there you go.
Great. Well, it's really good. At least we can see you. Technology has made it easier now to get across to you, Andrew. Now, let's start with projections and reprojections that we've had before now. A lot of issues underlining development for Nigeria. Because of all of these projections, we need to also face reality and see what we have on ground. First, let's do a review of the projections that we've had before some of these challenges that we face now. One is fuel scarcity. Another is hiking aviation fuel. I was just discussing that earlier, which is affecting airfares. What do you think all of this, and even the global issues, do you think that would affect all of the figures that we've had before now? Growth of about 3.5% is what we're looking at.
Well, I mean, what I've always said over the years is that we have to be cognizant of what's happening around the world. But the reality is Nigerians have the capability of charting their own economic future. And I'm actually more positive than I've ever been on it. I think 3.5 is eminently achievable in official statistic terms. We can discuss what that means a little later in the show. But I think a lot of things that people have worked on for a number of years are coming together in 2022. And I think we'll exceed that 3.5. As you said, the numbers have exceeded the last little while, have exceeded what people like the IMF and the World Bank have predicted. And I sense we're kind of close to liftoff. As you know, I mean, we need to have a growth rate around 6 to 8%. 3.5 is better than 2 or 1.5, but it's not what we need.
It's not what we need, but there are a lot of improvements that we need, and there's focus on telecommunications, trade, manufacturing, and maybe less dependence on oil. How does this come to you?
Well, I mean, I think that what's really different than 5 or 6 years ago, when we had the very high oil prices in 2014, people talked a little bit about diversification, but there was no action. And then we had an incredibly painful period in 2016, 2017. I think now people understand there really is a movement, a proper movement towards diversification, both at the government level, at the federal level, at the state level, at the in the private sector on that. I don't think we're going to waste the opportunity. I mean, if oil prices are 120 or 150, we eventually will get a fiscal dividend in the country and some relief on our exchange rate pressure. But what I don't think is going to happen is I don't think Nigeria is going to waste that high oil price again. I think the movement towards having diversified FX is well understood. And of course, the CBN came out and said, look, they didn't give a date. Some people published a date, but the CBN didn't give a date. But the direction of travel is if you need a foreign exchange, you're going to have to source it from a private source, no longer from the central bank. And that's really going to be a game changer for the country and help this diversification drive. But in terms of what we should be exporting, I think we've been very clear in the last couple of years that the number one export that Nigeria has is Nigerian brains. And of course, part of that is the diaspora. But increasingly, we're having export of services with people out without leaving the country. So I'll cite the amazing company Outsource Global, based in northern Nigeria. It's founded by Amal Hassan, who's a national heroine. It's got over 1,000 seats. It may have much more now. I know she's growing very fast. 1,000 seats for business process outsourcing. So her clients, the company's clients, are in the UK, the US, Europe, and their service is delivered by university-educated Nigerians in the north. So she's earning FX for the country. She's employing a lot of young Nigerian graduates, which is really critical. And I think we're going to see more and more of that, because we all understand in the short term, there's physical constraints to exporting. So it's hard for us to be competitive in manufacturing with our port system, with our road system, with our power system. But we're competitive in services now. And I see this happening every day across Nigeria. So I'd like to see more emphasis on the export of services. And the other area where we really have a comparative advantage are in a few of the major crops, the 5 big crops, if I can remember them all: sesame, palm oil, cassava, and it always escapes me when I'm on television. The other two, it'll come to me, but we have a comparative advantage in those. And I know there's a lot of effort on both the government and private actors to export more from the agricultural space. So I expect the services and agriculture will be the two big things that drive us in the next 5 years for exports.
I want to stay a bit with manufacturing, and one of their major complaints has been the Forex issue. I know we'll definitely touch on that big elephant in the cupboard, which is Forex. Do you think that improving FX supply to the manufacturing sector would help change this narrative?
Well, I mean, we have been very clear for 5 or 6 years, 7 years, that we would like to see a liberalized exchange rate. This is a big open economy, lots of imports, exports. We've created a distortion. There are historical reasons for it. I understand to some extent the CBN's rationing of the FX, but the system is really unworkable. The CBN said it, they were part of the ERGP a few years ago, which said we were moving to market-determined exchange rates. I think in the new National Nigeria Development Plan, which has just been released, we're moving to market exchange rates. And we were on the path to that. And the I&E window, for example, unfortunately, because of COVID, we had these widening spreads in between the parallel rate and the official rate, which really creates a distortion. But as I said, the CBN has come out and said, in the future, not yet determined when, but in the future, companies will have to source their own FX rate, which really is a drive to market-determined exchange rates. And from the manufacturing viewpoint, I mean, they'll then have the certainty, at least, of knowing they can go to the market at the market price. They can source what they want. But it's inevitable we're moving in that direction. It's been a bit slow. A little bit like the foil issue. We've made steps to take away the subsidy, and then it's kind of come back on, and now we're in election year. So I don't expect either the foil issue or the FX issue to be resolved in 2022. But I think the direction of travel is clear, and I'm pretty sure by 2024 we're going to have both no foil subsidy, and we're going to have a market-determined exchange rate, and both of those things will really benefit our economic growth. And I think the manufacturers will be happy as long as they have more certainty in the way the FX regime operates. They'll be able to play their part. And of course, given the weakness of the naira, I mean, they're desperate to be able to use locally sourced materials, and they make a big effort to do that. It's just that every product has many inputs, and sometimes there may be a few inputs that you can't source locally. So why close the whole factory down because you can't get the FX for that? You'll pay a little bit more to get that, but those products will come in and be part of the mixture. But most of the value added, 85-90%, will still be in Nigeria.
Great stuff. Now, let's touch on the oil market, because I'm one of those that believe that we need oil to diversify because we need to get some more funds from the crude oil market. But we've not been even meeting up with quota, that's our quota from OPEC, looking at the gradual increase that we've had in recent times. What is responsible, or what more do you think can be done to improve production one way or the other, particularly at this time where energy transition is somewhere around the corner?
Right. So, I mean, the NNPC, particularly with oil now at $119 or 113 as we speak, I mean, there has to be a massive focus on getting production up. I mean, we've been as low, I think, as 1.2, 1.3 million barrels a day. I think today it's about 1.5. We need to get it up to 1.8 and 2, and then we really will get the benefits of $110 oil, at least for a little while, to help us diversify. So you're exactly right. I mean, we continue to have, I think, diversion of a fair amount of our oil. We get different estimates of that. I mean, the estimate I've seen, I think, is maybe 200,000 barrels a day, and we continue to have, in communities that are not necessarily taken care of in terms of their needs and the impact of the oil there. So, I mean, the NNPC, and of course, the NNPC has now said it's going to take over the Exxon assets, not Seplat. So I think the NNPC is very focused and recognizes they need to get that up in the short term. on that. It would hugely benefit us. If it was $40, it wouldn't benefit us so much because the production cost is $25 or $30, so the margin's quite low. But at $110, there's an urgency to take advantage of that high market and the fact we're not using our OPEC quota. But the other thing I would add that has really changed in the last 8 days is the gas industry. So the country made the decision, the federal government was very clear in MPC, we should be pivoting to be a gas nation. I mean, both because gas is a cleaner transition fuel as we move to net zero, also because gas can be used domestically for production of power for vehicles, but also because of the incredible export potential of it. And so that was the right policy direction coming out of the federal government. But now we've had something else happen, which is Europe in particular and the world realizes it doesn't want to depend on Russia for gas. So I think in the very short term, there's a real opportunity for Nigeria to take advantage of this and to get the investment level required to really build up the gas infrastructure. And the problem with the gas strategy before was people understood that it was the right direction, but was Nigeria considered an attractive enough investment destination for the tens of billions of dollars required? Well, the world has changed. People desperately want to diversify, Germans, the French, the United Kingdom, away from Russian gas. And if I had one piece of advice, people know I don't normally give advice in Nigeria, that Nigeria doesn't need it. But I would say I'd really like to see the federal government and the players in the gas industry in Europe discussing the openness of we passed the PIA and the need for investment for security reasons, energy security reasons for Europe to invest in Nigeria on that. So I give that one piece of advice. I said I almost never give advice, but I think it's really critical to take advantage. I won't use that term because it's a horrible human tragedy unfolding before all our eyes, but it is a chance for Nigeria to help Europe and to get the investment we might not have got in more peaceful times without recognizing the Russia threat.
Almost finally, we see rates being increased across board. We wouldn't expect the Fed to increase rates. And monetary policy in Nigeria for some time has been, well, neither here nor there. There's been this retention and all of that. Do you think all of these moves would affect CBN's decision, probably the forthcoming meeting, to shift rates, one way or the other to accommodate all of these challenges and maybe to also battle or try to reduce inflation?
Well, I think that in a way, the inflation pressures are real. And of course, I think over 50% of Nigerians spend over 50% of their income on food on that. And so food inflation in particular is really a pernicious problem for the bottom of the pyramid in Nigeria and something we all need to be concerned about. But fundamentally, when you ask what's causing food inflation, in my view, I'm not an expert, as people know, but it's the security situation. And of course, I don't comment on the security situation. As I said, I'm not an expert, but the fact that it disproportionately affects agriculture and food production because people can't plant. They're concerned about the security of their areas. I've talked to my friends who are in the industry, and what's happening a lot of times in insecure areas is farmers are planting smaller acreage, smaller hectareage close to where they live, where there's more secure, they're more able to defend themselves, not going to further away fields. So those fields are lying fallow for the present time. So I think that the central bank, of course, can in response to what's happening around the globe and domestically raise the Naira interest rate. But I'm not sure that's going to solve the fundamental problem. We need more food to be grown for the price of food to not just stop going up, but actually to come down. And we have enormous potential for that, as everyone knows. And there's a lot of effort on many people's parts, including the federal government, state governments, the private sector. And one thing that's really happened in the last 5 or 6 years is this concept of the whole food supply chain. So it's not just a question of growing food, but it's all the storage facilities, the processing facilities, which relates to manufacturing, electricity usage. But there's progress everywhere. And I think that one example of very good progress is the CBN launching the Nigerian Commodity Exchange. That's a big part of growing agriculture. So in terms of dealing with inflation, as I said, it's a food inflation for the bottom of the pyramid. And the best way to address that is the security issue and the organization of the agricultural industry, and also tied to the 5 big export crops, as I said earlier today. But whether we move the headline, the MPC rate up 50 basis points or down 50 basis points isn't going to solve those fundamental issues.
And now let's look at what we expect. You move. I always love to project, particularly when it has to do with economic issues. But of course, we won't rule out the realities on ground. COVID-19 infection seems to be on the low side at the moment, and we've seen improved global oil prices as we move on in the year. And gradually, there's pickup in economic activities aside from the war between Russia's invading Ukraine. What are your projections, both globally and for the domestic economy?
Well, globally, it's hard to project because I think we're in a very difficult situation, partially also because of demographics. I mean, we have shrinking working age populations Sorry, can you hear me?
I have Dr. Andrew Nevin back there via Zoom. Dr. Nevin, you were making a point with regards to your projections before we had some issues with audio.
Right. So, I mean, in the global sense, growth is always going to be subdued now because the working age population globally outside of Africa is shrinking. So economic growth is pivoting to Africa because of our demographics. In the Nigerian context, a few things are going to happen this year. I mean, to begin with, I think there's going to be, from the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, a rebasing of the economy. And if people may recall, I think it was maybe 2013, rebased, and we ended up having a much bigger economy than we thought. And I really expect the same thing to happen. I think the economy is at least 20 to 25% bigger than what we measure officially. We understand all the informal activity. I mean, the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics does their best, but it's very hard to capture the totality of economic activity across this country. So we have a bigger economy, I think, as I said, than we measure on that. And that's good news for the country. On that. And I think there's a number of things that are coming together that really, as I said earlier, are kind of liftoff. And one of the things that's really critical is that the state-led development, I mean, we've said it for years, but you really see it coming to fruition when you see so many governors stepping up to do things. And then you see the federal government working well with the state level. You see multilaterals like the World Bank. I think we were the first country that the World Bank was prepared to work not at the federal level, but at the state level. So that's taking off. And then, of course, that really shares the burden because it's not reliant on one ministry to do something. It's reliant, every state can step up to do it. States are engaging with their diaspora, for example, on that. So I think that's one of the most powerful forces. And I suspect we're going to beat that 3.5%. And not too distant future, be up to the 6 to 8%. So if we invest in service-oriented growth, if we invest in our agricultural supply chains, if we get the energy situation sorted out, and of course, a big step of this week was the decision or the step forward to say that the energy, the electricity could become a state matter. And I think each state will be able to sort out its own electricity situation. So I think we're seeing real progress across the country. It's always a little more uncertain in an election year, but I've never been more optimistic. In the 13 years I've been in Nigeria, despite all the challenges, and everyone knows the challenges, and I don't stand up and repeat bad news that everyone knows. Despite the challenges, I see so many positive signs in this country, and I really feel like the next 5 years we're going to turn the corner and we're going to really get that growth, but not just headline GDP growth, but this emphasis on broad-based prosperity, sustainable prosperity. So I'm very optimistic about the future of Nigeria.
I appreciate your time there. Dr. Andrew Nevin is the Chief Economist and Partner, PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thank you so much, and do enjoy your weekend.
You're very welcome, Tola. You too.